They had breathing machines on him. He was bandaged and everything.
He remains in critical condition, which was his condition when he arrived here at UMC. I've been told this evening that he is scheduled for some additional surgery, which is not unusual when you have injuries that are this severe.
After a breach of security in September of 1996, a person got a picture of Tupac on his deathbed, which has since become lost media. Lost media are pieces of film or recordings which are of notable incidents which have never seen the light of day. A film coming from a disposable camera has photos of Tupac on his deathbed, with this being a second security breach after the first being his untimely murder. Although the real photo has never surfaced, with this photo being from the TV series Unsolved, which is on A&E. People have made viral videos claiming that they have the picture, which isn't true. Another picture has been a 1996 autopsy photo, which we can't show due to it being not safe for life, as it allegedly shows Tupac going through the embalming process. More information about the chaotic hospital scene has been shrouded in mystery, such as police reports revealing that an FBI undercover asset was at the hospital. In this video, we're going to take a look into the unsolved death of Tupac Shakur and the suspicious events within his final days on Earth, including his last moments within the hospital.
Shakur was shot 4 times after leaving the Mike Tyson boxing match in Las Vegas in a car driven by Marion Suge Knight, the head of his label, Death Row Records.
On September 7th, 1996, at around 11:15 p.m, while traveling down the Las Vegas Strip, rap star and established actor Tupac Shakur was involved in a drive-by shooting while traveling as a passenger with his label head Suge Knight. The BMW that they were traveling in was shot at a whopping 13 times, with 4 of these shots hitting Tupac, with the most critical entering his lung. Now, before we go into what took place after the casualty being in hospital, firstly we're going to take a look at what placed Tupac in the vulnerable position of being open to be shot at in such a busy place during a time of a Mike Tyson fight, making it even more populated with the shooters getting away scot-free. Tupac, 2 weeks before the trip in late August of 1996, just before firing his lawyer at Death Row Records, was going through legal trouble where he had 3 cases pending against him which violated the 3 strikes law in Los Angeles. Tupac's lawyer being the entertainment lawyer of the record label which he was signed to, being Death Row Records. The lawyer by the name of David Kenner had intervened with moving one of the cases to Las Vegas, so it was no longer in the violation of the 3 strikes law within Los Angeles. Now this was done through David Kenner's connection to Las Vegas attorney George Kalisis. George Kalisis is an attorney in Las Vegas who was the business attorney for a nightclub called Club 662. Suge Knight was interested in purchasing a stake in the Club 662, which spells out MOB on a keypad, which are the initials of the LA street gang Members of Blood. Kalisis set up a charity fundraiser event for a Las Vegas Metro police officer by the name of Patrick Barry, and it outlined that due to the circumstances of it being a charitable event, Tupac's personal bodyguards would have to surrender their weapons. Tupac's security detail was run by a former Compton cop called Reggie Wright Jr., who through information found by his father, Reggie Wright Sr., being the head of Compton PD's gang division, formed a relationship with Suge Knight sometime between 1993 and 1994, where Suge Knight paid him $300,000 to start Right Way's Protective Services, where Suge Knight, at the request of his distributor being Jimmy Iovine over at Interscope Records, hired police security through Reggie Wright Jr.'s former ties to law enforcement.
I insisted that they get real security. Real cops.
Tupac's bodyguards, Frank Alexander and Michael Moore, who are standard security detail, not being former cops, had a meeting at the home of the attorney's house on the morning of September 7th, along with Reggie Wright Jr., where they were told to leave their weapons behind in their car due to the event taking place. One of the bodyguards, by the name of Michael Moore, refused to give over his weapon, so he was removed from Tupac, with Suge Knight requesting that at least 5 bodyguards be present, as they were going to attend a Mike Tyson fight, but with Michael Moore being removed by security, this left Tupac with just Frank Alexander.
I had 2 of the toughest guys for him, and Reggie pulled him off of me. It didn't have to happen.
Michael Moore, due to not surrendering his weapon, was told to stay at Club 662 with Reggie Wright Jr. So now, Tupac, as part of getting past the 3 strikes laws, with it being moved to Las Vegas, the lawyers had outlined with the judge that Tupac's sentence be lowered to community service, where he would have to perform at the charity event for the Metro police officer to avoid going back to jail. This means Tupac was placed in a position where he had to travel to Las Vegas, set out by the judicial system through judges and attorneys, which outlined that due to the circumstances of it being a charity event, his security detail had to also surrender their weapons. Reggie Wright Jr. had several police officers from the Las Vegas PD along with Los Angeles who were at the club supplying security. Author John Potash, who wrote the FBI's War on Tupac, revealed how LAPD detective Russell Paul had asked his superiors why so many officers were working within Death Row Records, to which he got the response of, quote, "Consider them covert agents," unquote.
Dozens and dozens of his fellow police officers at all levels of Death Row Records. And when he went to his superiors to ask what were they doing there, they said you can consider them covert agents.
The security radio system which the bodyguards used inconveniently was interfered with by an undercover FBI asset by the name of Kevin Hackey. Kevin Hackey was a former Compton cop who was the police partner of Reggie Wright Jr., and he was approached by the FBI and ATF to go undercover posing as a bodyguard due to his relationship with Reggie Wright Jr. to collect information on Death Row Records. Suge Knight's personal communication along with the officers of Death Row Records had all of their phones tapped, and the FBI also had Club 662 under surveillance, with this being real FBI surveillance footage. Kevin Hackey had the radio used by bodyguard Frank Alexander, with another radio being in the possession of Reggie Wright Jr. at Club 662. Hackey was not assigned by the FBI to work on the night of the shooting, although Reggie Wright Jr. requested him to work. So with his removal, the radio communication was now suspended between the bodyguards. Hackey revealed in an interview with Bomb First that wiretaps of the phones revealed that the incident had suspicion behind it, saying that the tapes revealed, quote, "It was suspicious from day one," unquote. He also revealed how the FBI were in a car behind an entourage, surveilling the shooting incident, having it on tape, stored in a secret FBI archive.
Somebody who was working for the FBI, Kevin Hackey, said he had the documents to prove that the FBI had Tupac under surveillance when he was killed.
The shooting occurred after Tupac and Suge Knight left a Mike Tyson fight, which occurred in the MGM Grand, with Mike Tyson set to appear at the charitable event also. While leaving in the MGM Grand lobby, Suge Knight and Tupac, along with the Death Row entourage of Blood gang members, noticed Crip gang member Orlando Anderson, who had a problem with one of the gang members in the crew. Tupac, along with Suge Knight and the entourage, then ran over and attacked the Crip. After this and following changing clothes and meeting at Suge Knight's house in Vegas, Tupac and Suge Knight then travelled with an entourage to go to Club 662 for the charity event, being for the Metro police officer, so Tupac could perform as part of his community service. At 11 PM, two Las Vegas bicycle cops stopped the BMW for having the car's sound system too loud, but they were released shortly after and continued with the entourage to Club 662. In front of the BMW was a man by the name of K-Dub, who in the TV documentary Suge Knight, American Dream, American Nightmare, Suge refers to as, quote, "someone who messes with Reggie." He also claimed in the documentary that this person done something which he knew he shouldn't have done, which was cut in front of them.
As we getting right up to this point right here, at the last minute, one of the little dudes who deal with Reggie, for something that he know not to do, he cuts in front of us. As he cuts in front of us, Cadillac starts to shoot.
Behind them was bodyguard Frank Alexander, with Tupac's group artists riding as passengers. Suge Knight, in a later prison interview, claimed Frank Alexander had told him that as part of the security detail morning meeting, he was told to ride directly behind them, which then caused the boxed-in situation.
Frank blocked us in purposely. Later they told him to do.
Behind the bodyguards were Blood gang members belonging to Suge Knight's entourage, and behind them were the FBI, who were taping the cars in front. With the BMW being boxed in, a white Cadillac had pulled up beside it and unloaded 14 shots into the BMW. One of Tupac's artists, Yaki Gaddafi, who was murdered just 2 months later and was travelling in the car behind, described how the shooter had a large or beefy African American arm, claiming it was not Orlando Anderson, who most people believed it to be. Frank Alexander, who was in the same car witnessing the shooting from behind, claimed during an interview that he felt like it resembled a cop's shooting pattern. Bodyguard Michael Moore, who was at Club 662 with Reggie Wright Jr. after refusing to surrender his weapon, claimed in a documentary, Tupac Assassination, Conspiracy or Revenge, that while outside with Reggie, he heard the words "got 'em" come over Reggie Wright Jr.'s radio. Reggie Wright Jr. has denied that this incident has ever taken place during interviews which he has done. The white Cadillac was chased by the Blood gang members who returned fire, with the Cadillac ultimately escaping. Suge Knight made a U-turn against oncoming traffic, with the car then coming to a stop on the strip. Two bicycle cops approached the car and apprehended Suge Knight, with blood shooting out of his head from being grazed by a bullet. An ambulance was called, but although the BMW was new, the door was malfunctioned, which didn't allow it to open, so Suge Knight intervened to force it open to be able to get Tupac out and placed into the ambulance. Tupac was taken to the University Medical Center of Southern Nevada, where he was heavily sedated and put on life support.
He remains in critical condition, which was his condition when he arrived here at UMC. I've been told this evening that he is scheduled for some additional surgery, which is not unusual when you have injuries that are this severe.
Tupac arrived at the hospital after losing a lot of blood, so he was placed under sedation into a medically induced coma, being overseen in the ICU. Surgeons removed his left lung and placed him on a respirator. Doctors had given him a 50% chance to live, although internal bleeding had continued. 4 witnesses, being hospital security officers, named LAPD cop Officer Richard McCauley as being on assignment guarding a trauma unit around the clock working shifts, with Compton police officer James Green. Another officer rumoured to be at the hospital was Kevin Gaines. Kevin Gaines was a LAPD Rampart cop, with the Rampart division being involved in the Rampart scandal, being one of the worst police corruption scandals in US history. He was a handful of officers from the scandal who was tied into the civil suit of Biggie Smalls, blaming the LAPD as being behind his murder as collateral for Tupac's.
The exact same tactics were used to kill Biggie Smalls. US intelligence would call collateral damage.
Kevin Gaines was found to have been dating Suge Knight's ex-wife Sharifa Knight, and he was being paid cash by death row artist Snoop Dogg to supply security.
So, next time I go, there's real police. I found out they were Rampart guys.
Snoop Dogg visited Tupac in hospital, with it being rumoured that Kevin Gaines was there too. FBI reports show that Kevin Gaines was in Las Vegas under a special assignment for the LAPD, being 2 days before Tupac arrived, until 2 days after his death. Police reports show that Kevin Hackey was revealed as an undercover FBI asset for the first time after visiting the hospital days after the shooting, where an uproar occurred after he revealed he was undercover for the FBI to gain access to the hospital. Tupac's rap group, The Outlaws, set up their own security perimeter outside the hospital, where they drove off paparazzi trying to obtain pictures of the star's last moments. However, an internal security breach occurred, despite all the cop security within. A hospital volunteer had briefly made it past security and snapped a deathbed photo of Tupac with a disposable camera, with the woman then being apprehended by the security, with the film then becoming in the possession, possibly of the police security. It's the only existing photo of Tupac on his deathbed, which remains as a piece of lost media, as it is never surfaced. While another piece of lost media includes the FBI surveillance of the shooting taking place. Tupac continued to get death threats while in a coma, as anonymous calls were being made into the hospital, claiming they were going to finish him off.
Rapper and actor Tupac Shakur is dead at the age of 25, just about a week after sustaining 4 bullet wounds last Saturday night in Las Vegas.
Tupac died on Friday the 13th of September 1996 from respiratory failure and cardiopulmonary arrest, resulting from intense internal bleeding. During his autopsy, a photo leaked of him on the embalming table, but were unable to show it due to guidelines. Suge Knight paid $3 million for a speedy cremation under the request of his mother, which took place sometime between the 8th and the 14th of September 1996. Compton cop James Green was responsible for transferring his ashes back to Los Angeles from Las Vegas. Following his death, the spotlight was put on Orlando Anderson, with most people believing him to have been the shooter. LA detective Russell Paul claimed there was CCTV footage within the MGM Grand lobby bar, which showed Orlando Anderson there during the time of the shooting, which is why Las Vegas PD didn't take him seriously as a suspect after Compton raids were carried out. Suge Knight, in a 2020 prison interview, claimed Orlando Anderson was not the shooter, and he went on to name cops tied into the Rampart scandal who he believed was involved. But for this video we have to bleep out the names with the censored version for guideline reasons.
The sad thing about it, Orlando wasn't even the shooter, you know? They said that, but that's not at all. The truth need to be shown, need to be said. Was all involved. They were trying to kill me too.
The club attorney George Kalisis, following the incident, began with representing corrupt cops in Las Vegas who were involved in federal corruption charges. Suge Knight was sentenced to 9 years in prison in 1996, not only for his probation violation which was due to the fight which occurred, but for a conflict of interest with a prosecutor called Lawrence M. Longo, with a deal being made directly through David Kenner with the prosecutor concerning the prosecutor's daughter being signed to the label, which could be seen as a bribe or leverage within a judicial system. Reggie Wright Jr. in 1997 became in charge of assisting with running the operations of Death Row Records, getting orders from Suge Knight in prison, while getting advice and assistance from David Kenner. In 1998, Orlando Anderson was murdered in a shootout in Compton, and Reggie Wright Sr. was one of the first on the scene, and Compton PD at the same time had claimed to have found a gun within a backyard in Compton, which was then run through ballistics tests by the ATF, which came back as matching casings found at the murder scene. Kevin Hackey went on Fox News and claimed this gun was confiscated off of Tupac's group member Hussein Fatal 2 months before the shooting on July 4th, 1996 by a Santa Monica cop at the House of Blues, which was run through the federal database at the time to reveal it was clean, and afterwards the FBI cleared Kevin Hackey to give the gun back to Reggie Wright Jr. Kevin Hackey in the same Fox News report claimed this was the same gun which killed Tupac.
Hackey says he first showed the handgun to his FBI handlers and then turned it over to Reggie Wright Jr. Hackey believes the murder weapon was the same gun he gave Reggie Wright Jr.
Reggie Wright Jr. has gone on to claim that this was not the same gun, and the gun Kevin Hackey was talking about was thrown in the ocean. Hackey later retracted his claims and apologized to Reggie Wright Jr. Keefe D, being the uncle to Orlando Anderson and a Southside Compton Crip shot caller who was in Las Vegas with Orlando Anderson, was recorded unknowingly by LAPD cop Greg Caden, who was tasked with attempting to prove no cop involvement in the similar murder of Biggie Smalls. Keefe claimed on tape that Orlando Anderson was the shooter, with this confession getting Keefe D out of a lifetime prison sentence after being involved in a sting operation from Caden. Keefe D, in a separate interview with documentary filmmaker RJ Bond concerning the Caden tapes, also claimed that Suge Knight allegedly had cops carrying out hits for him, naming one of the sergeants who was allegedly a hitman for Suge Knight. Tupac's mother herself believed her son's death was more than just gang related. In this video, we took a look into some of the mysterious circumstances within the hospital during Tupac's last days on Earth. Someone dressed as a hospital volunteer captured a photo of him on his deathbed, with the camera then being confiscated by security. The photo has never surfaced, however, fake reports online have people claiming to have leaked it, which are not real at all. Let me know what your thoughts are on all this in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, smash the thumbs up button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell button so you can get all the future notifications for when I upload. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.